So we just talked about the Details tab, the Cropping tab, the Lens Correction in Capture One, but one of the tools we haven't talked about yet is going to be the Adjust in Brush tab. Now this tab is masking basically with the power of healing and cloning. The reason I like this is because, like we talked about in the Color Editor section, where we had some of the problems with the redhead model, where we tried to select the specific tone of just the skin, but because she's a redhead model, what happens is the tones in the hair are very similar to the skin. So what did we have to do? We had to use a uniformity, take it into Photoshop and mask it in. Although it works, and it works very well, I want to show you how to mask it in Capture One as well, because it has the same kind of features available to you. So here we have one of Gary Martin's images, which is a headshot, and it's a good variety to keep because we want to cater to pretty much any photographer that uses this program and show you the versatility that no matter what you shoot, you can use the program. Now, when we go into this local adjustment brush tab, the first thing that happens is, number one, I need to go back and double check that I have my arrow key and not the spot removal brush, because that was from the last section. Whenever I click this, it goes back here. Now the intention of this is specifically if you know what you want to do. It's not for every single image, it's not for every purpose, but it's specifically for adjusting areas that are local, not global. It's not to adjust everything, but maybe if you have a lot of light fall off, you can fix that. You can do that because of masking. If you want to do any healing work or cloning work, which is Photoshop related, you do that here as well, and it keeps it non-destructive. I'll show you an example of everything. So first we have our image here. We've already selected, and I just imported it into our regular catalog. I will zoom in so we can get a good look of our subject, and I will bring it down. Now let's pretend, for instance, that we feel that we want to bring up some of this exposure just on his face and not every part of the shadow. What we'd have to do first is we need to create a new layer. So we will come down here and select new layer. We'll name this layer Shadow Adjustment. This is for the purpose of showcasing how this works, not that I would do this on every image, okay? So once we've selected a new layer, we want to tell the program what we want to do. So we can say, let's up the exposure. The difference here is that when we start adjusting the exposure, it's not going to show just yet because the layer itself is masked out. It's black if you imagine in Photoshop standards, because by default, it's completely covered. It's waiting for our brush to start brushing. So I like to think of it in this way. This exposure, or any adjustment that we do right now on a new layer, is basically changing the parameters of the brush itself. So we are loading the brush with light, if you think of it that way. So first thing first, I want to load a higher exposure to the brush. So when we do start brushing, it's going to paint this exact exposure amount. So I'll load this, let's say 2. Next, after we've loaded the brush, we are going to start drawing on the image itself. Now we'll first click on the brush tool to activate it, and then we'll come over here next to it where the slider is, and this is going to be our cursor tool settings. This cursor tool settings shows my size of my brush. You can see the size of the brush, the hardness, meaning how soft the brush is or how abrupt it is. I keep it to 0 because I think a softer brush is better, and the flow. And the flow is basically how fast the buildup starts happening as we brush. It's like a gentle brush. So I'm going to keep it, say, let's say about 5 or 6, okay? And that's it. I will turn that off. Before I start brushing, make sure that under this tool here, if you push down on the brush, it says never display mask. Make sure that is the only thing that is checked aside from draw mask, okay? And the shortcut for that is M, so you can go between display mask and draw mask. If I hit display mask, what will happen is when I start brushing, it's going to show red. And I personally don't like that because it interferes with my results. Let's just go ahead and show you. So never display mask. And then when I bring my brush size down, I can do that with a keyboard shortcut. And on mine, it's the bracket keys on the right-hand side of the keyboard. But for you, it may be in a different location. And you can find that under our keyboard shortcut settings. That'll allow you to do so. Or you can change the brush size here as well. Okay? Now, I will select the brush size that is most useful for me, and I'll start brushing. And as I start brushing, you notice that it starts painting in a higher exposure to that specific area. How do I know this? Well, two ways. If I go back to this brush icon and select always display mask, you see that redness that starts painting across his face. Well, it's not an actual color, it's just a mask. It's just showing you that's where we've painted. You can see why I don't like it very much because I don't want a red cast on his face. So I'll say never display mask. The other way to tell is if I turn this shadow layer on and off, it works just like Photoshop where I can turn on and off the layer. If I want to reduce the intensity, I can go erase mask, change my parameters again, making sure my opacity is 100, my flow is low, and then just start brushing, and then erase. The shortcuts are located here. B is draw mask, E is erase. So something to keep in mind. So you can do that with exposure, right? But what else can you do? Well, very simply put, you could do white balance. So I can say, let's do a new layer and say white balance. I can load my brush again. Let's say I'm going to do a white balance that's crazy, just for illustration effect. I can hit B, which is draw mask. The settings are the same. I'll change this, and I'll say, let's change the white balance of his face. And as I start brushing, you see it gets a lot warmer because we've changed the white balance. You can also change the white balance after you brush. So once I brush, I can change the parameters. I go, well, you know what? I think I prefer a white balance that's cooler. Let's go over here. And I think that actually fits because if I go back to shot, it's a little warm and I can cool it down, I can warm it up, whatever it is. So you could do that with white balance, you could do it with exposure. And if you take a look here, these tools are everything we talked about earlier in our color and exposure tab. So I can undo that if I want to. I can minimize that. I can minimize exposure. I can then even do it with dynamic range. I can say, let's bring up the shadows. Actually, no. Let's add a new layer. Let's bring up the shadows on this layer. I go back to my brush tool, and then when I start brushing, only the shadows start coming up. And I know this because I can uncheck and check, and it just brings up just the shadows, which I could also do to the side of his face. If I want to flatten it out, I can do that, but obviously you don't, so you can take that off. And the same thing for the tie. If I decide that, you know what, I just want it to the tie, I can take the erase brush. I can erase all that work we did to the side of his face because it was terrible, and I'm not proud of myself for this. And then just quickly switch over to B, which is my brush. Spacebar, drag down, change brush size, and paint on the tie, and just the shadows on the tie come back. It's almost like I manually tried to mask it out. So there you have it. It brings that back. And again, I would use my Wacom tablet typically for this, but just to give you an example of how it works regardless of what you're using.